Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Book Echo. Today, we're diving into an incredible book that challenges the way we think about happiness, freedom, and personal growth. If you've ever felt trapped by others' expectations or struggled to live authentically, then The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi is a game changer. This book teaches us that we don't need anyone's approval to be truly happy, and that the courage to be disliked is actually the key to living a fulfilling life. I'm excited to take you through this journey of self-discovery, based on Adlerian psychology, which will show us why we are capable of change at any moment, and why we should never let the past define us. Get comfortable, grab a cup of tea, and let's explore how to find the courage to change your life and achieve real happiness. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what parts of this journey resonate with you the most. Let's get started. Introduction. The courage to change your life. The courage to be disliked is rooted in Adlerian psychology, a fascinating approach developed by Alfred Adler, who was one of the founding figures of modern psychology. Unlike other branches of psychology that often emphasize trauma and the weight of the past, Adlerian psychology offers a different perspective. It suggests that we are not bound by our past experiences and that we have the power to change our lives at any moment. It's a liberating idea that challenges the belief that our circumstances define us. Instead, Adler argues that our present choices, and the courage to make those choices, are what ultimately shape our lives. In this book, authors Ichiro Kishimi and Fumite Koga present these powerful concepts through a dialogue format, which makes it both engaging and accessible. The book is structured as a conversation between a young man who is struggling with dissatisfaction and doubts about life, and a philosopher who represents Adler's teachings. This dialogue format allows readers to experience the philosophical journey firsthand, as the young man questions, resists, and ultimately begins to understand the core teachings of Adlerian psychology. At the heart of the book is the concept of courage, specifically, the courage to change your life and the courage to be disliked. It's about overcoming the fear of rejection and letting go of the need for approval. True freedom, according to Adler, comes when we stop living to meet others' expectations and instead focus on living authentically, in alignment with our own values and goals. This kind of courage allows us to overcome the challenges that hold us back, and it's the foundation for finding true happiness. This book invites us to embrace our ability to change, to face life with courage, and to accept that we may not please everyone, and that's okay. It's a powerful message for anyone who wants to break free from the chains of the past and live a life that feels true and fulfilling. Now, let's dive deeper into these ideas and discover how we can cultivate the courage to change our lives for the better. 1. You can change. The philosopher's first lesson to the young man is simple but profound. You can change. Adlerian psychology emphasizes that our lives are not predetermined by our past experiences. Unlike other theories that often highlight trauma and upbringing as fixed influences, Adler argues that we are not products of our past, but creators of our present. This empowering idea suggests that we have the ability to redefine our lives at any point, regardless of what we've been through. The young man initially struggles to accept this, believing that his past failures and experiences have made him who he is today. The philosopher, however, challenges this notion by explaining that the past does not dictate who we are or what we can become. It's not our past that holds us back. It's the way we interpret and use it. If we choose to see ourselves as capable of growth, change becomes possible. One of the essential concepts introduced here is the separation of tasks. Adlerian psychology teaches that much of our suffering comes from entangling ourselves in things beyond our control, like the opinions and expectations of others. The separation of tasks involves identifying which problems are truly ours to solve and letting go of those that are not. By focusing only on what we can control, we free ourselves from the weight of unnecessary burdens and give ourselves the space to change and grow. This first step is about shifting our mindset from one of victimhood to one of empowerment. It encourages us to embrace the idea that our present choices hold more power than our past experiences. It may require courage to change, but the philosopher assures the young man that this courage lies within all of us. The journey toward real happiness starts with recognizing that we are capable of change and that it's up to us to take that step. By adopting this mindset, we are invited to take responsibility for our own lives and to realize that we hold the power to create the life we desire. It's about letting go of excuses and believing in our capacity to grow beyond what we once thought possible. 2. Unhappiness is a choice. The philosopher challenges the young man's belief that unhappiness is simply a result of unfortunate circumstances or bad luck. Instead, Adlerian psychology suggests that unhappiness is often a choice, one that people make, consciously or unconsciously, to avoid change. This idea may feel uncomfortable at first, but it's also liberating. The notion that we choose our unhappiness implies that we also have the power to choose something different. The philosopher explains that many people use their problems as excuses to remain in a familiar, albeit unhappy place. By holding on to past traumas or perceived limitations, they avoid facing the fear and uncertainty of change. For example, someone might think, "I can't do that because of what happened to me in the past," and use this belief as a way to avoid taking action. This type of thinking is a form of self-protection. It keeps us from facing failure or rejection, but also keeps us trapped in a cycle of dissatisfaction. Adler's perspective is that trauma is not the defining factor of our lives. Rather, it is the meaning we assign to those experiences that shapes us. If we view our past as an obstacle, it will remain a barrier. But if we choose to see it as something we can learn from and move beyond, it loses its power over us. This doesn't mean dismissing or ignoring past pain. It means deciding not to let it dictate our future. The philosopher also introduces the idea that many people unconsciously choose unhappiness because it allows them to avoid responsibility. Choosing to be happy requires taking ownership of one's actions, decisions, and attitude. It means stepping away from the comfort of blaming external circumstances and embracing the courage to act differently. It means recognizing that while we can't always control what happens to us, we can always control how we respond. In this part of the book, the young man struggles with the realization that his unhappiness might be a result of his own choices, but the philosopher reassures him that this understanding is the first step toward real freedom. By acknowledging that unhappiness is a choice, we empower ourselves to make a different choice, one that leads to growth, fulfillment, and true happiness. The courage to be happy, therefore, lies in our ability to take responsibility for our own lives and let go of the excuses that hold us back. It's a call to action, to stop waiting for circumstances to change and instead take ownership of our own well-being. Happiness, Adler suggests, isn't something that happens to us. It's something we create through our choices and our courage to live authentically. 3. The concept of interpersonal relationships. In this chapter, the philosopher introduces one of Adler's core ideas. All problems are ultimately interpersonal relationship problems. At first, the young man finds this idea difficult to grasp. He believes that his struggles are personal, rooted in his career dissatisfaction, lack of purpose, and fear of failure. However, the philosopher explains that most of our issues stem from how we relate to others, how we see ourselves in comparison to them, and our desire to be accepted and validated. Adlerian psychology views interpersonal relationships as the foundation of human experience. Whether it's our relationships with family, friends, co-workers, or even the broader community, these interactions shape much of our happiness or dissatisfaction. Many of the anxieties we carry are rooted in fear of judgment or concerns about how others perceive us. We may avoid taking risks, not because we lack the ability, but because we're afraid of being disliked or criticized. One of the key concepts introduced here is the idea of horizontal versus vertical relationships. In a vertical relationship, one person is seen as above or below another, either in terms of power, status, or worth. This hierarchical view often leads to feelings of inferiority or superiority, which can create distance and resentment. In contrast, a horizontal relationship views all people as equals, each deserving of respect and value. This perspective encourages healthy, cooperative interactions that are free from the need to prove oneself or dominate others. The philosopher challenges the young man to see how much of his distress is tied to seeking validation from others. He explains that when we base our self-worth on how others view us, we give away our power. Instead, the goal is to develop independence from others' judgments, to find fulfillment in our own values and actions, rather than constantly seeking approval. The idea of breaking free from the need for approval is central to Adlerian psychology. It requires courage because it means letting go of the comfort that comes from fitting in or being liked. The philosopher encourages the young man to consider that the only opinion that truly matters is his own. When we stop trying to mold ourselves to fit others' expectations, we begin to live authentically, and it is in this authenticity that we find true freedom and happiness. In this part of the book, the young man begins to understand that his desire to be accepted has been holding him back from making meaningful changes in his life. The philosopher urges him to focus on cultivating horizontal relationships, where he values himself and others equally, without the need for comparison or competition. By doing so, he can begin to resolve the interpersonal struggles that have been contributing to his dissatisfaction. Ultimately, this chapter teaches us that the quality of our relationships determines the quality of our lives. By shifting our perspective from one of competition and judgment to one of respect and equality, we can improve not only our relationships with others, but also our relationship with ourselves. The key to happiness lies in letting go of the need to be better than, or approved by, others, and instead embracing the value we each inherently hold. 4. The separation of tasks. The philosopher now introduces a crucial Adlerian concept: the separation of tasks. This idea centers around the notion that much of our suffering comes from overstepping boundaries, trying to manage things that aren't truly within our control. The philosopher explains that a key step toward achieving happiness and freedom is learning to identify which tasks are ours and which belong to others, and then letting go of the latter. The young man struggles with this at first, as most of us do. We often feel the need to involve ourselves in other people's emotions, behaviors, and decisions, or we worry constantly about how others perceive us. However, Adler argues that each person is responsible for their own tasks, and by trying to manage others' lives, we create unnecessary stress for ourselves. The philosopher uses the example of a child who is studying. Whose task is it to study? It's the child's, not the parents'. When parents worry excessively about their child's performance, they are taking on a task that isn't theirs to begin with, which leads to anxiety and frustration. The concept of the separation of tasks can be incredibly liberating. It teaches us to focus only on what we can control: our own actions, attitudes, and decisions. By letting go of tasks that belong to others, such as their reactions, choices, or judgments, we free ourselves from the emotional burden of things we have no real influence over. This doesn't mean being indifferent or uncaring. It means recognizing where our responsibility ends and where another person's begins. In relationships, this concept is particularly powerful. Many of our interpersonal problems come from trying to control how others think or behave. We may want our partner to act a certain way, or our friends to make choices that align with what we believe is best for them. But these are not our tasks. Our responsibility lies in how we communicate, how we treat others, and how we show up in the world, not in dictating how others respond. The philosopher also explains that letting go of others' tasks is an act of respect. When we interfere with someone else's choices, we're essentially suggesting that we don't trust their ability to handle their own life. By respecting others' autonomy and focusing on our own tasks, we foster healthier, more supportive relationships. The young man finds this concept challenging because it requires a shift in perspective. He realizes how much of his anxiety stems from trying to meet others' expectations or make everyone happy. The philosopher encourages him to recognize that his happiness is his own task, and others' happiness is theirs. By focusing on what he can control and letting go of the rest, he can begin to live more freely, without the constant worry of trying to manage others' perceptions or actions. The separation of tasks ultimately empowers us to take ownership of our own lives. It's about understanding that while we are all connected, each of us is responsible for our own happiness, actions, and choices. By embracing this idea, we can let go of the burdens that aren't truly ours, reduce unnecessary stress, and focus on what really matters: living authentically, with courage and integrity. 5. Freedom and the courage to be disliked. In this chapter, the philosopher delves deeper into the idea of true freedom and what it really means to live authentically. The core message here is that true freedom comes when we stop being controlled by the need for approval from others. The philosopher argues that seeking constant validation traps us in a cycle of dependency, where our actions are dictated by how we think others will react. The young man protests. After all, isn't wanting to be liked a natural human desire? The philosopher acknowledges this, but explains that living to be liked prevents us from being ourselves. When we prioritize pleasing others, we often compromise our own values and dreams, which leads to frustration and dissatisfaction. This is where Adlerian psychology introduces the idea of the courage to be disliked. The courage to accept that not everyone will agree with or appreciate who we are, and that's okay. The courage to be disliked is about freeing ourselves from the shackles of external validation. When we are constantly trying to meet other people's expectations, we can't act in alignment with our true selves. The philosopher challenges the young man to think about the times he's made choices out of fear of judgment. Those moments when he avoided taking a risk because he was afraid of what others would think. This fear, the philosopher explains, is what keeps people from experiencing true freedom. True freedom means living your life according to your own values, even if it means facing disapproval. It requires the courage to say, I'm going to live my life the way I believe is right, and I understand that not everyone will agree. The philosopher explains that this isn't about being reckless or indifferent to others. Rather, it's about recognizing that no one can please everyone, and trying to do so ultimately leads to a loss of self. The young man expresses concern about becoming selfish or inconsiderate if he stops worrying about what others think. In response, the philosopher emphasizes that living with courage isn't about disregarding others' feelings. It's about distinguishing between genuinely caring for people and acting out of fear of their judgment. The difference lies in intention. When we live authentically and follow our values, we can still be kind, compassionate, and considerate, but we do it out of choice, not out of fear. This chapter encourages us to examine how much of our behavior is driven by the desire to be liked, and how liberating it can be to let go of that need. The courage to be disliked is ultimately about being willing to stand alone in our beliefs and choices. It's about taking responsibility for our own happiness and not outsourcing it to others' opinions. The philosopher urges the young man, and all of us, to find the strength to accept that not everyone will approve of our choices, but to move forward anyway, knowing that living authentically is worth the risk. The key takeaway here is that freedom and happiness are closely linked. True freedom requires courage, the courage to face disapproval, to be different, and to stand up for who we truly are. When we let go of the need to be liked, we give ourselves permission to live in a way that is true to our values and desires. And in doing so, we open the door to real fulfillment and joy. 6. Contribution to others. In this chapter, the philosopher introduces an essential element of Adlerian psychology, the idea of contribution. According to Adler, true happiness and fulfillment are found not in seeking validation from others, but in contributing meaningfully to the lives of those around us. Contribution shifts our focus from ourselves to the broader community, fostering a sense of connection and purpose that goes beyond personal achievement. The young man, who has been grappling with the idea of finding meaning in life, initially finds this concept difficult to understand. He wants happiness, but has always thought of it as something to be acquired, something that comes from personal success, validation, or achievement. The philosopher, however, explains that this approach is inherently flawed. True fulfillment comes not from what we get, but from what we give, how we contribute to others' well-being. The philosopher also addresses the inferiority complex, which is a common issue in Adlerian psychology. Many people feel inadequate or inferior because they constantly compare themselves to others, trying to prove their worth. This sense of inferiority can often lead to striving for superficial successes, which rarely provide lasting happiness. Instead, the philosopher encourages the young man to move away from seeking superiority over others and instead focus on contributing, on using his strengths, knowledge, and abilities to make a positive impact. This doesn't mean that we must engage in grand acts of service to find fulfillment. Contribution can be as simple as helping a friend, listening to someone in need, or sharing knowledge. The key is to see ourselves as part of a community and to find ways to make life better for others in small but meaningful ways. When we focus on how we can be of service, our sense of purpose becomes clearer, and the burden of always trying to prove ourselves starts to lift. Adlerian psychology also emphasizes the importance of self-acceptance as a foundation for contributing to others. The philosopher explains that we cannot genuinely contribute to others if we do not first accept ourselves. Self-acceptance doesn't mean complacency. It means recognizing our flaws while also appreciating our inherent value. Once we stop judging ourselves so harshly, we're able to turn our attention outward, finding joy in helping others without the constant pressure to prove our worth. The young man begins to understand that happiness isn't something that can be chased or acquired like a trophy. Instead, it's something that emerges naturally when we stop focusing on ourselves and start thinking about how we can make a positive difference. Contribution shifts our mindset from one of scarcity, where we constantly feel the need to protect our own interests, to one of abundance, where we see opportunities to connect and uplift those around us. The philosopher's message is clear. Real happiness comes from feeling useful, from knowing that we have something to offer the world, no matter how small. By shifting our focus from self-centered pursuits to the well-being of others, we find a deeper sense of meaning and fulfillment that brings real joy. The courage to be happy, therefore, lies in our ability to see ourselves as part of something bigger and to live a life of contribution, one that enriches not only our own lives, but the lives of those we touch. 7. The courage to be happy. In this chapter, the philosopher addresses one of the most profound challenges we face: the courage to be happy. On the surface, the idea that we need courage to be happy might sound counterintuitive. After all, isn't happiness what everyone desires? However, the philosopher reveals that achieving true happiness often requires stepping out of our comfort zone, letting go of old beliefs, and embracing a new way of living that might invite criticism or discomfort. One of the main reasons people struggle to find happiness, according to Adlerian psychology, is because happiness involves change. The philosopher explains that while many people say they want to be happy, they also fear the changes that happiness requires. True happiness demands that we take responsibility for our lives and move beyond the excuses that keep us in our comfort zone. It requires courage because it means accepting discomfort, stepping away from old habits, and facing the unknown. The young man questions whether happiness can really be a choice, especially when life is full of so many challenges. The philosopher counters by suggesting that happiness is not the absence of problems. Rather, it is the attitude we bring to those problems. Happiness is choosing to live in alignment with our values, even when it is difficult. It is the decision to seek meaning in every experience, good or bad, and to keep moving forward regardless of external circumstances. Adler's view of happiness also emphasizes the importance of living for the present moment. The philosopher explains that many people become trapped in regrets about the past or fears about the future, which keeps them from experiencing the joy of the present. The young man realizes that he has spent much of his life waiting for something external to bring him happiness: a better job, a certain level of success, or approval from others. The philosopher urges him to stop waiting and start creating happiness right now, by making choices that reflect his true self and values. The concept of self-acceptance is central to this chapter. The philosopher emphasizes that we can only be truly happy when we accept ourselves as we are, flaws and all. This doesn't mean we stop striving for improvement. Instead, it means we approach ourselves with kindness and compassion, understanding that perfection is not the goal. It is the willingness to embrace our imperfections and to see ourselves as worthy of happiness just as we are that allows us to live with joy. Another important element of happiness is taking meaningful action. The philosopher explains that happiness is found not in passive pleasure, but in active engagement with life. Whether it is through pursuing a passion, contributing to others, or challenging ourselves to grow, happiness comes from being fully involved in life, taking risks, making mistakes, and learning along the way. This is why the courage to be happy also involves the courage to take action, even when the outcome is uncertain. The young man begins to understand that happiness is not a destination to be reached, but a way of living that requires courage every day. It's about letting go of the need to be perfect, the fear of being disliked, and the belief that external circumstances dictate our joy. True happiness lies in embracing who we are, taking responsibility for our choices, and living authentically, even if it means facing challenges and discomfort. The philosopher's final message in this chapter is that the courage to be happy is something we must practice consistently. It's not about a one-time decision. It's about the choices we make every day to live in a way that aligns with our values, to contribute to others, and to let go of the fears that hold us back. When we find this courage, we discover that happiness is not something elusive. It is within us, ready to be expressed when we live with authenticity, purpose, and love. 8. Conclusion: living authentically without regret. In the final chapter, the philosopher brings together all the ideas discussed throughout the book and encourages the young man to embrace a life of authenticity and courage. The key to a fulfilling life, as Adlerian psychology teaches, is to live without regret, making choices based on your own values, free from the fear of disapproval or the desire to meet others' expectations. The young man begins to see how his own fears and insecurities have held him back from truly embracing life. He realizes that he has been waiting for external circumstances to change before he could feel happy or at peace. The philosopher encourages him to recognize that the only person who can make that change happen is himself. True happiness is not about waiting for the world to align with your desires. It's about creating joy and meaning through the choices you make each day. The concept of courage ties everything together. The courage to be disliked, the courage to be happy, and the courage to contribute are all about embracing the risk and discomfort that come with authentic living. This means being willing to stand up for what you believe in, even if it means facing disapproval. It means accepting that not everyone will like you, and not everything will go as planned, but still having the strength to move forward. The philosopher also emphasizes the importance of seeing yourself as part of a larger community. Contribution to others is not just a way to find happiness. It is a way to create a meaningful life that transcends individual desires. When we focus on how we can make a positive impact, we stop seeing ourselves as separate and isolated. Instead, we become connected, recognizing that our lives gain value through the relationships we build and the differences we make. Living authentically also involves embracing the present moment. Many of our regrets come from living in the past or being overly concerned with the future. The philosopher encourages the young man to let go of those regrets and to focus on what he can do now. The only time we have control over is the present, and it is in the present that we find the opportunity to live in alignment with our true selves. The young man realizes that the path to happiness is not about achieving some perfect state or having everything go his way. It is about making the choice every day to live courageously, to be true to himself, and to find meaning in his actions. The philosopher reassures him that this is not a path without challenges, but it is a path that leads to genuine fulfillment and peace. Living without regret means embracing the imperfection of life and accepting that you are enough just as you are. It means having the courage to pursue what matters most to you, even if it means stepping out of your comfort zone. The young man understands that this journey is ongoing and that he will need to make the choice to live authentically every day. But now, armed with Adler's teachings, he feels ready to take on that challenge. The book ends on an uplifting note, with the philosopher encouraging the young man, and all of us, to live with courage, authenticity, and love. Life is not about avoiding discomfort or trying to please everyone. It is about making the most of the time we have, contributing to others, and embracing the person we truly are. The courage to be disliked, the courage to be happy, and the courage to contribute all come together to form the foundation of a life well lived. A life without regret, filled with purpose and genuine happiness. By practicing these principles, we can free ourselves from the burdens that hold us back and step into a life that is truly our own. Key takeaway: live boldly, live authentically, and have the courage to face discomfort to achieve a life of real meaning and happiness. Thank you all for joining me on this journey through The Courage to be Disliked by Ichiro Kishimi. This book challenges us to rethink the way we live our lives by embracing the courage to change, to live authentically, and to find real happiness by focusing on contribution and self-acceptance. It's a powerful reminder that we don't need anyone's approval to live a meaningful life. That true freedom comes when we stop being controlled by others' expectations and instead choose to be true to ourselves. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this summary, it's the idea that happiness and freedom are within our reach, as long as we have the courage to let go of the past, to embrace discomfort, and to live in alignment with our values. This journey isn't always easy, but it's the path to a life without regret, a life filled with purpose, joy, and connection. If you found this summary helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the Book Echo for more book summaries that help us grow and explore new ideas. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. What resonated with you the most from this book? Do you feel ready to embrace the courage to be disliked? Let's start a conversation.